Africa, historically, sub-Saharan Africa, has been fundamental to the global prosperity of the advanced countries. Okay? And Africa had a role to play. It has a role as a raw material producer. We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap. Because we will never, as Western economists, as Western policymakers, we cannot afford to allow Africa to industrialize and start producing manufactures. Okay, so we will do everything to stop that.
At some point in our life, I'm sure we all have heard these statements: fastest growing economies in the world. And if you look at the top 10 of fastest growing economies in the world, you always find African countries, and we jubilate and celebrate to these numbers. But in real life, those numbers means nothing. Let me try to give you a short summary and a short explanation of what those numbers means. What those numbers means when they say 10% growth, 20% growth, they are not comparing you against other economies. When these numbers are thrown at us, it sounds positive and motivating that finally our economies are finally growing, 10%, 20% growth. But what they are doing, they're not comparing the GDP of that country with another country. What they're simply doing is comparing the GDP of that very country to its own GDP of the previous years. So in simple terms, they're simply comparing you to yourself. If your GDP the previous year was $1 billion and all of a sudden next year you are at $2 billion, you have grown 100%. This is amazing, and we celebrate and we jubilate. So in that case, you might be the fastest growing economy in the world. You might be at number one. But realistically, is there anything that can actually fundamentally change within the economy and realistically affecting the lives of the people? Probably not. So we have to be careful and we have to be smart about this. These numbers can just be mental masturbation, because if you look at some of the countries who are on the list of the top 10 fastest growing economies in the world, you might be surprised to find South Sudan and Libya and Uganda. And you ask yourself, really? Because if you look at those countries in real life, poverty is still way, way worse. Surprising enough, even some countries which are devastated with war and crisis and instability, you will find them on this list because guess what? They haven't stopped mining the natural resources. Countries like Libya, countries like South Sudan. Because even if the conflict is going and if the fighting is going, same as the DRC, they have not stopped mining and taking out the natural resources. Because what happens is, as Africa is a resource-based economy, Africa exports natural resources for the most part. No manufacturing happens. The industrial growth of other countries which sources natural resources from Africa increases the demand of those natural resources, because as they need more and more natural resources to fuel their growth, for example, China, it simply means they will demand more and more natural resources. So they will come to Africa and dig more and more of those natural resources, even if they don't dig it themselves, but they will start importing more and more natural resources. And Africa exports more of those natural resources. And our GDP, for a moment, it will reflect as if our economies are growing. And this GDP number is actually very, very deceiving, because if you look at it, some of these companies which are in our countries mining those resources or extracting those natural resources are not African companies. They come from Europe, they come from Asia, they come from America. They come and take those natural resources, dig more and more of it, and export them back home. But if you look at it, those numbers are going to be added towards the GDP. But in actual fact, what are we actually benefiting as Africans? That our governments are only receiving a portion of that, or little to say a little percentage of that. In some instances, in some countries, you hear of numbers such as below 5%. And the rest is pocketed by those multinational companies, which are American or Asian. So in actual fact, we as Africans benefited nothing from it. Without industrializing, without manufacturing our own products, creating employment through industrializing, through the manufacturing jobs, there is no growth. Absolutely nothing. This is a myth. This is just a fallacy. This is our imagination. This is a mental masturbation, thinking and imagining that our economies are growing. This is actually stupid. We are actually destroying ourselves. And the imagination and the assumption that natural resources will never get finished, it's something very, very dangerous, that our leaders and us as Africans are sitting on top of this idea. Because at the end of the day, these companies and these countries come into our continent and siphon those resources, and they even take these resources and keep them in their own reserves like gold and diamond, and we let them go because we need that little bit of money so that we can survive. But we do not think about the future. What happens with this economy of ours, which is heavily dependent on exporting natural resources? If these natural resources are depleted, we need to start industrializing so that we can also depend on manufacturing and other means of generating income for our countries. And also obviously creating meaningful jobs, because at the end of the day, these natural resources extraction industries which are in our countries barely generates meaningful jobs which actually can pay well and be transformative to our societies and to our actual lives as individuals. At the end of the day, these GDP numbers are nonsense. They mean nothing. If I wanted to be a conspiracy theorist, they are actually putting us on those lists so that we can feel good about ourselves, so that we don't wake up. These numbers are just a comparison to your own GDP numbers of the previous years. So if you were very, very poor and didn't have nothing much going on within your economy, and boom, voila, some kind of natural resources is discovered within your country, and they come, they mine it, and they take it away. For a year or two or three, the GDP numbers might increase and seem like as if you're growing, but when that natural resources depletes, it all goes down, comes back down crashing again, and you're back to zero. So us as Africans, we need to wake up, and our leaders must wake up to this fact. It's a reality that our leaders sometimes ignore. We have to transform Africa. We have to think differently. We have to look long term in the sustainability of our economies